Hey guys, and welcome back to Mad About Skin. It seems to all be kicking off in the sunscreen industry right now, and I've been bombarded with questions related to some recent testing which has been released into some of the biggest names in sunscreen. In a nutshell, that testing showed that a lot of the big name products weren't actually delivering the SPF that the brand advertised, and that's got a lot of people alarmed. Well, in today's video, I want to break it apart for everyone, explain the ins and outs of everything that's going on, and share with you my thoughts, feelings, and opinions on what's happening. Sit back, relax, let's talk all things sunscreen. Now, of course, in today's video, these are my thoughts, feelings, and opinions, and I want to hear from you guys too. What's your take on this topic, the brands implicated? Let me know by sounding off down in the comments section below. One of my favourite times every single day is to sit down with a big mug of tea, read and respond to each and every one of your comments. So thank you from the bottom of my heart to each and every one of you that just engages with any of the videos that I create here on the channel. It really is so much appreciated. I'm also, the eagle-eyed amongst you might have already noticed this, but I'm also experimenting with a new camera setup at the moment. Bought a new camera, it arrived the other day, and this is the first video that I'm actually filming on it. So for the regular viewers of the channel, can you tell a difference? Is it an improvement? What are your thoughts? Share them down in the comments section below. Whatever your thoughts on all of that, if you enjoy this style of content where I bring you up-to-date skincare information and advice, then the best way of letting me know is by reaching down, giving the video a big thumbs up and a like. I do really check the like profiles on each and every video, and those videos which get more likes, I'll generally replicate in terms of future content, because I always want to create the videos that you guys most enjoy consuming. So if you do find yourself enjoying this at any point whatsoever, make sure to let me know by leaving a like. Now, without further ado, let's cut that waffle and delve straight on in. So, in a bit of a nutshell, road travelled so far. An organisation known as Choice out of Australia conducted testing into 20 of the biggest names in the sunscreen industry to test the validity of their SPF claims. What really trickled down a little bit of an alarm is the results that were seen on the back of this testing. The range of different SPF values which were shown was quite alarming. 4 of the sunscreens actually passed with flying colours, delivering sky-high SPF protection in advance of what the brand were claiming on the bottle. But the other 16 didn't. In some cases, it was marginal, it was just below what they were claiming, and in some cases, in one in particular, it was as low as SPF 4. Let that sink in. That is a huge difference, and I know this has got alarm bells ringing, and people started to say, can we actually trust the sunscreens that we're buying and applying to our skin? So I thought I'd break it all apart in today's video, what we know and what hopefully we will learn in the coming days. So first and foremost, I always like to put out a disclaimer to say sunscreen testing, like any test in science, has a margin of error. Nothing gives you an absolute exact value, and so we always need to reflect on that. If a brand is claiming SPF 50 plus and the testing shows that it might just be marginally below that, that could all well be in the margin of error, and so it's nothing to be too alarmed about. And I always like to set the narrative too, that the difference in terms of the amount of UV rays blocked from an SPF 30 versus an SPF 50 is marginal. My preference is always for an SPF 50 because I think, why would you not go for the highest protection available? But the actual difference in protection levels between SPF 30 and SPF 50 aren't huge. So if you've read any of these studies and seen one of your favourite sunscreens underperforming, know that even at an SPF 30, you're still getting a really robust level of protection. Doesn't make it okay, you still should be delivering what the brand say, but just to set some context around that, because I don't want anyone worrying unduly when it comes to products that they might have been using. This margin of error can be a little bit problematic when it comes to sunscreen testing, because you could test the same product 4 or 5 times and get quite significantly different results. And I think that's something that maybe people don't understand and can throw a little bit of uncertainty into the mix. In fact, 8 of the sunscreens which were tested performed above SPF 40. So whilst 4 specifically did exceed the amount of SPF protection the brand were claiming, another 4 performed really well in terms of delivering SPF of 40 plus, and that all sits within the margin of error. I think where the issue comes with those products which actually performed way below what the brand were claiming, outside of that margin of error, and that's real cause for concern. There were definitely some themes in this testing too. Not everything was equal. So let's call out the good guys, the brands that performed really well. So generally speaking, Nivea and La Roche-Posay of the big sunscreen houses actually performed the best in this testing. The La Roche-Posay sunscreen far exceeded what the brand were claiming it would deliver, so that's a big tick in the box. And the Nivea products that were tested all either overperformed or performed at the level of expectation, taking into account that margin of error. So they're the good guys that come out of this testing. On the opposite side, the lowest amount, one product from Ultraviolet, which was their lean screen mineral sunscreen, actually tested at SPF 4. That is alarming, especially because the same company that did this testing actually retested a different batch of this product at a different lab, and it resulted in an SPF of 5. So this isn't just a one-off error, maybe something went wrong with the test. This is actually something that's been retested, different batch, different lab, and came out with broadly the same result. What's actually really worrying about this is SPF 4 is so insignificant that most products, even ones without an SPF filter, will give some degree of SPF protection around that level. So if you're just using coconut oil or something, you're probably going to get something in that ballpark, which actually leads me to believe, were there any UV filters in this at all? Now, the brand have come back, Ultraviolet have come back, to be fair, and I will leave a link again to their response down in the description box below in the interest of fairness. They've come back and said this doesn't chime with their testing, which they've put the product through, which showed it delivered an SPF 60 in the testing that they did. That's a huge discrepancy, and so as that brand, I would be saying either we need to look at our quality control. Was there an issue with this particular batch or multiple different batches? Was there an issue with our testing? Their default position seems to be to discredit the testing which has just happened. Again, 2 different labs, different batches, is to discredit that rather than trying to look into what might have gone wrong. And I don't think that's the right response in this, particularly when it comes to sunscreen. So Ultraviolet, not doing what I think they need to do in terms of responding to this, but there were a lot of other brands which did perform below expectations, even taking into account margin of error. And I think what stuck out is the mineral sunscreens out there tended to perform worse versus expectations than the chemical sunscreens. This is something that people don't really talk about an awful lot because generally outside of the US, where there is a big market for mineral sunscreens, the rest of the world tend to go for chemical sunscreens, and they make up over 95% of the sunscreens consumed. And so people tend to not pay as much attention to the mineral sunscreens. However, they did tend to perform more poorly on average in this testing than their chemical counterparts. And that can be for a whole host of reasons. Zinc, which is the primary mineral component in mineral sunscreens, is really difficult to stabilize. To prevent it clumping, which means you end up with an uneven distribution, it can settle in the product. It can be really difficult to actually get it right to make sure that SPF protection is sustained even if the product's sitting on your shelf. Now, brands should be doing this. Products should be shelf stable, they should be doing this, but I'm just saying it can be a little bit harder and more challenging, which is why perhaps that could be one explanation for some of these lower scoring sunscreens in the mineral category versus their counterparts in the chemical category. Overall, I'd love to see brands becoming more transparent, more open with the testing that they should have definitely conducted prior to launching any sunscreen onto the market. That way, as consumers, we can get that confidence knowing that a brand wants to be transparent about the products that they're producing. This is something a lot of Korean sunscreen brands do now as standard, and I definitely think that should be applauded. We do also need to have some perspective. You know, an SPF 50 plus sunscreen that is measured in this particular test as, say, a 43 on the SPF index is still giving really good and robust protection. And when you factor in margins of error which exist in testing, doesn't mean that that's an absolute fail. However, when a brand is measuring an SPF 4 versus an expected SPF 50 plus, that's the problem, and that's really where I think brands need to address this. I have linked the study down in the comment section as a pinned comment, so if you wanted to check it out in more detail, look at the individual products that were tested and what they scored as, you're more than welcome to do so, and hopefully that helps. But I'd love to know, what's your take on this? Sound off in the comment section below. I just wanted to put your minds at rest to say that just because there's a lot of talk about sunscreen failures, it doesn't mean that every sunscreen out there is failing. It doesn't mean that the products we might have been using for years have let us down. It's all about looking at the new ones and the products, the brands that have been tested and understanding how these tests actually take place. And hopefully this will add a little context for you. Let me know your thoughts down below and wherever you are in the world, guys. Stay safe, stay well, and love your skin. Take care. Bye.